Anesthesiologists, what are the best things people have said under the gas? I was the patient. I was getting my gallbladder removed, and as they were wheeling me back, I started to cry and said, "I'm gonna wake up with my lips stitched to someone's butthole." When I got put under for a colonoscopy, I didn't really fall asleep during the countdown. I just looked at the nurse a bit confused and said, I don't notice anything. And she smiled and squeezed my wrist and said, "Just give it a moment." As soon as she said that, I started fading out, and according to her, the last thing I mumbled was, "Oh, that fricked, you magic witch." When they told me to start counting, I apparently counted for 45 seconds before I went out, but I only remember the first 10 lol. Last year they were knocking me out for a colonoscopy. It was the third time I had been put under in a year. As such, I had a curiosity. I had heard that when they knock you out, you are still awake for a while. You just don't remember. So in the spirit of science, I proposed a test with the anesthesiologist. When she started the medicine, I would begin counting backward. When I would wake up, we would compare what I remembered to what she observed. Plunger down 99, 98, 97. I remembered nothing more. Minutes later I awoke. The anesthesiologist spied me and came over quickly. "What did you remember?" she asked. 97. She began laughing. "You got down to 7. That's awesome." I had a patient start to joke before surgery and finish it when they woke up without prompting. Edit. Changed promoting to prompting. Thanks swipe. I can just imagine it going like, "What do you call a guy W a rubber toe?" Hours later, Roberto. I went under for a nasal canal surgery, and apparently after the surgery I was holding the nurse's hand and repeating, "I love you, don't leave me," over and over. I had a patient coming out of anesthesia who opened his eyes as I was switching him from a mask to nasal cannula. "Tell me this hospital has the most beautiful women I've ever seen." Made me blush. I was so flattered, and made the rest of my day awkward with my co-workers teasing me about it. "Whoever you are, sleepy man, I simultaneously thank you and hate you." I was given a relaxer prior to colonoscopy and was rolled into the room. Doctor asked me what I had done that weekend. I said I went to the MN State Fair. "Oh," she says, "eat anything interesting?" I said, "Why don't you tell me?" No laughter whatever in the room. And then I was out. I swear she gave an extra shove because I half woke up during the procedure and remember groaning. My cousin had a similar experience before his colonoscopy. They gave him the relaxer and he then started calling his gown his dress and kept trying to cover his butt because it's not time for his close-up yet. Not an anesthesiologist. The anesthesiologist that came in to check me over had bright blue teeth and lips. Keep in mind I was high as frick. I asked him how Smurfette was last night. I passed out hearing the nurses laughing. Not an anesthesiologist, but I knew a guy who had surgery and afterwards wanted to go home. He wasn't recovered enough to, and the nurse wasn't gonna let him get up yet. He turned to the nurse and said, "You may not realize this, but I'm a ninja and we heal 3 times faster than normal people." At that, the nurse stopped trying to keep him in bed. He stood and immediately ate the floor. Floor. My dad works with that stuff. Funniest thing he's heard is, "Hey Mr. Doctor, my butt itches and I'm too high to scratch." No, he didn't help. The dude passed out right after. I was about to be put under for a colonoscopy while the nurse was trying to position me in a way to make it easiest for them to work. I had my knees to my chest and was passing out from the gas when I asked the nurse to paint me like one of her French girls, then passed out. Still makes me cringe. Funny though. I was a patient. I went in the get a MRI at 7. They injected me with something and I said, "Wow, that made me really sleepy." Then the doctor said, "Sucker shouldn't be able to talk." I still haven't told anyone I remember that. I'm pretty sure my mother was in the room, but IDK. Woke up after wisdom teeth surgery alone in a small recovery room. I called out for my mom and dad, and when they didn't immediately come to my side, I called out for Captain Kirk. My fiancé and I had broken up within the last week and was still dealing with that horribly. I was on pain meds for my shoulder and was scheduled for surgery in the current week. The day of the surgery, I was to get a nerve block. The anesthesiologist was the one performing the nerve block. He and I were chit-chatting. and he was just a really comforting person. He was telling me about everything that was going to go on during the surgery. Then we were just chit-chatting about life when the topic of the breakup came up. He was even comforting with that. So after that, I was wheeled into surgery. He was there to put me under, which for some reason put me at great ease. As I was going under, I guess I started talking through the mask and he lifted the mask to hear what I was trying to say. When I boldly stated I still love you, Fianke's name, while holding direct eye contact with him, I didn't know I did it. Not until he visited me in recovery. He said thanks for the nickname, then told me what I said. I guess the entire surgical staff referred to him by my fiance's name for the duration of the surgery. So not only did I call this poor guy a woman's name that stuck with him for the duration for the surgery, I stated how much I loved him to boot. When I went back for the second surgery, guess who my anesthesiologist was? Regardless of my foul ups, he is an awesome anesthesiologist and really good at his job. My wife couldn't take me for my first colonoscopy due to work, so my mother did, and apparently coming out of anesthesia, when they were removing my IV, I told the nurse, "Oh, that's neat. I've taken a lot of those out, but I've never had it done to me, and my patients are always dead." Apparently she looked very concerned by this information, and my mother had to explain that I've been a licensed funeral director for many years and hospitals and other facilities often do not remove tubing. Apparently I then followed that up by telling the young nurse she had a nice butt, but not as nice as my wife's. My mother felt free to share that with everyone. So yeah, I creeped out a nurse by talking about my occupation, and then even more by commenting on her butt in a backhanded compliment. I broke my hand tumbling once and had to get surgery. He goes to put the mask on my face and says this is oxygen. I cough as the mask goes on. He pulls the mask away and I said I trusted you. You lying frick. That's the last thing I remember. I did have an IV, but I'm almost positive the mask is what knocked me out. I remember everything up to the mask though. I remember it got really cold further into the hospital and the warm blankets they gave me. Not an anesthesiologist, but when I severely dislocated and broke my knee, I apparently gave one of the doctors that was just finishing resetting my leg a huge slap on the back and yelled it's fixed. You guys are the best doctors I've ever seen. Giving a 5-star review. Wife said the nurses were cracking up. I'm a pretty big guy and the doctor I gave the friendly pat on the back was a relatively small dude. When I had a cavity filled a few years ago, I vaguely remember hugging one of the doctors after waking up. As an added bonus, I apologized to my parents because I didn't think I could drive. I was too young to drive at the time. Nurse anesthetist here. When I was in school I was getting ready to get a lady off to sleep and going through my regular spiel. I had the mask on her face and I said nice big breaths as I pushed propofol. Right before she went out she said thanks. I just had them done. I looked at my preceptor, we looked at the circulator, and we all burst out laughing. I now say slow deep breaths instead. I love telling that story. That lady made all our days. I also learned that this is an old joke, so maybe that lady had heard it before. I hadn't and laughed so hard I pee someone else's pants. This is hilarious. I could easily see this being on a show like Scrubs. Before my emergency appendectomy and right as they wheeled me away, I grabbed my husband and said, very loudly, don't forget to tell them our backup plan. If this crap goes south, I want my legs and arms removed so you can carry me around in a backpack. The student doctor accidentally wheeled me into the wall cause he was laughing so hard. I think this might be best in the thread. Not an anesthesiologist, but when I was in the wear-off room after my wisdom teeth removal I started talking about dark doors and mind bees that were tearing me apart from the inside. I recall nothing. The mind bees erased your memory. Done. Not an anesthesiologist, but when my stepdad was going under for a surgery, he was almost out but at a sweet point that the doctor told my mom she could ask him anything and he wouldn't be able to help but answer truthfully. She asked, "Do you love me?" My stepdad replied, "You need to go on and get your little Yoda shoes." I'm pretty sure Yoda doesn't even wear shoes. Dong move by the doctor. Imagine if the guy answered no. I have a few. My first is a 17-year-old that just got her appendix out. She seemed really stoic and introverted when I first interviewed her, but when I was dropping her in the recovery room she went into total bro mode. She keeps saying everything was freaking lit. She keeps saying let's party bro and responded to every question with a frick yeah dude. My favorite though was a surgery on a lady in her 80s. She volunteered at the hospital and was a widow. In the recovery room I started hooking up her ECG. This involves attaching some cables to stickers on her up chest. When I reached for them she tried to just pull her gown down and show me her breasts. I said no, you don't need to do that. She just said this is so exciting, it's been a while since I've been with a man. The nurse just started laughing and I got a little red. She then said it's sure getting hot in here. Sorry, it's been a while. I had to leave after that, I was way too uncomfortable. I'm a CNA, female, in my 50s. I was assisting a lady in her 90s who needed 2 people to help her up. My co-worker was a very young and easily embarrassed dude. In reaching for the gate belt, I pinched this poor woman's nipple, and she yelped. I apologized profusely. That's okay. It's not like they haven't been pinched before, she replied happily. And my co-worker almost fainted in horror. I donated a kidney to my brother, and as I was coming out of surgery I made a joke to the nurse and said, did you get my appendix out okay? Problem was I never got to the punchline. As I passed out again, I entirely forgot about this until 24 hours it came back to me, and all I recall was the nurse's horrified face. They just took a kidney and I asked about appendix. This is hysterical. Not an anesthesiologist, but as I was going under for my shoulder recon, I realized the surgeons were blasting Back in Black by AC/DC, and I said, hey, is it AC/DC? Super confused, thought I lost a plot, and the surgeon comes over me, face mask and surgical goggles on, looks me dead in the eye and says, of course. What else are we going to rock out to while we operate? 1 second later I passed out. One of my cousin's friends is a neurosurgeon. The guy listens to Megadeth and Slipknot when he is performing surgeries. Crazy sucker. Not an anesthesiologist, but when I was going under for a surgery, my anesthesiologist asked what I wanted to eat after this surgery and apparently I said a steak with peanut butter. He laughed and said, where do you get those steaks? My uncle is one and he said someone started singing Phantom of the Opera, then immediately started rapping mumbled lines. He said he couldn't make out the words he was rapping and this was a teenager singing. And no, my uncle is not 1 year old, he 57. I used his one not as in he is 1 year old, as in he is an anesthesiologist. Not an anesthesiologist, but when I went in for my gallbladder surgery the nurse was an old co-worker and I blurted out on the table, I knew you'd see me naked before I was out. Glorious. When I woke up from surgery, the doctors asked if I wanted anything to eat. You got those crackers that come in packs of 6 with the cheese? No, we don't have those. Oh frick man, that's balls. We have the peanut butter ones, though. Ah, yeah, bitchin'. Mum's a PACU nurse, basically where the people go to wake up after surgery. Some of the men wake up and hit on the nurses. Lots of kids try to stand up and scream. Best story was the man who actually stood up and proceeded to get his dong out and helicopter with it. My brother went under and on his way out he said, holy frick, you are beautiful and I'm in love, to the nurse anesthetist. Just a patient and also redhead so it's harder to put or keep eyes under. During wisdom teeth operation my phone rang in my pocket. I answered it with a mouthful of gauze and just said womba and that was that. Such a giant pain being redheaded. I've had precisely one dentist believe that I could feel pain. You can bet your sweet bippies I go to him exclusively now. IANAA, but as a 13-year-old tonsillectomy patient, the one Oz cocktail I drank prior to anesthesiology didn't quite knock me out. A few surgical residents wheeled me into the theater before the surgeon anesthesiologist arrived. One said to the other, his eyes just opened, what do we do? Another chimed in, talk to him. The third, not sure what to say, opened the kit and said, here's the blade we'll be making the incision with. Yes, a fine choice. I had a simple procedure done when I was younger, but it was my second time being under any kind of strong knockout gas. Before I went under I looked at the anesthesiologist, who was a pretty cute grey-haired man, and said, "God, you're attractive, but I'm sure you hear that every day," and passed out. When I came to, I started hitting on all of the nurses, male and female. One of the nurses had an adorable face and I just grinned and said, "Man, you're so pretty. Ugh, you're just beautiful. Are you single?" I said that in front of my mom at age 19. She won't ever let me live it down. Also, the nurse was married and she let me down gently. I didn't mention that at the time. I was very curious and I wasn't sure on what I really identified with. My parents are very religious, so I chalked up my behavior to the meds. I'm still not 100% sure on what I am, but I am in a very happy relationship with my BF. My brother, when he came out of surgery after being on heavy sedation, wanted to draw a picture because Yo Gabba Gabba was on and they were drawing pictures. I gave him a pen and paper and after 5 minutes I ask, "What did you draw?" He smiles and holds up a picture of a bottle of mustard. He was 17 at the time. As a bonus, my brother also thought the blood pressure cuff they had on his arm was a pet octopus. He told us on the way home from the hospital we will need to stop at the pet store to get supplies. The mental image of that dumb post-sedation smile really makes this hilarious. Got a chuckle from me. I had my wisdom teeth out and supposedly still bleeding a good amount on the way to CVS to pick up the meds. My mom was driving and I was just staring out the window collecting blood in my mouth. Eventually it reached a point it was too much at a red light. Rolled down the window and just let it all flow out of my mouth. I look up and this lady is looking at me with just pure horror on her face. I proceeded, while still in some sort of haze from the drugs, to give her what I can imagine the bloodiest smile anyone has ever seen. She wasn't originally turning right but proceeded to make an immediate turn. I am so glad I can remember this while still being high. Some follow up. Once I got the Vicodin, I had like a 20 minutes convo about absolutely nothing that I had zero remembrance of. To the people afraid of having their wisdom teeth pulled, it's not bad. I had more pain from being hungry than the procedure itself. Mine were impacted never britches, so it was pretty much the worst case scenario. Had it done Thursday morning. Went to work Friday night on lifting restrictions. Went to a party Saturday night when the bleeding had stopped, but I drank a bit too much. Had been off the Vicodin for 36 hours. And had thinned my blood out and started bleeding at the party. I had to take my mom to the hospital, and while I was speaking to the doctor about her medical history, my mom was real insistent about them knowing her tennis elbow. Doctor, so is she on any medication? Mom, tennis elbow. Me, no, she's. Mom, tennis elbow. Me, she has tennis elbow. Doctor, I can tell. Mom, tennis elbow. I so know this. My mom is also all about making sure the doctor knows about some inconsequential thing that has nothing to do with what is actually going on. She now won't let me go with her into the room to see the doctor because I don't appreciate all the tiny details that need to be talked about. This works well for both of us. I got my wisdom teeth removed at 16. I grew up in a small, remote, white Canadian town. We had to travel to a slightly larger, slightly less remote town to visit the hospital there for the procedure. The new anesthesiologist there was a very nice Chinese doctor whose family had just moved up from the city. Now, and this is important later, I had just returned from a year away. I spent a year of high school as an exchange student in Taiwan and had only gotten back a few weeks earlier. Procedure happens. Nothing major goes wrong. And I come to in a hospital room in a fair bit of pain but mostly fine. My dad had driven me to the hospital and came in to see me and get me up to take me home. The minute he saw me, he burst into a laughing fit, and I could tell from his face that he'd been laughing about as hard as anyone could laugh. Once he finally found his composure, he explained to me what had happened. The anesthesiologist and a nurse came out into the waiting room after I was put under and apparently were white as ghosts. My dad asked if anything was wrong, and eventually the anesthesiologist, still in a daze, explained to my dad that after he administered the anesthesia, but before I was fully out of it, I began speaking to him in fluent Mandarin and that he thought maybe he needed to call someone to ask how it's possible that this redneck white teenager could suddenly gain the ability to speak Chinese under anesthesia. Needless to say, my dad thought this was hilarious and explained, to the doctor's relief, that the white kid did already know how to speak Mandarin and that he hadn't damaged my brain somehow. I love this. I started a new epilepsy med almost 15 years ago and suddenly I could only speak broken Spanish and was hallucinating dead relatives sitting on park benches next to me. English was totally gone and my husband didn't speak Spanish. Took 4 days to flush it all out and they never could explain it. Not under GA, but when I was giving birth I was pretty out of it. The radio was playing in the operating room, and Uncle Cracker came on. I apparently yelled, "I am not bringing my child into the world to this crap." They turned the radio off. Gimme the beat boys and free my soul, I'm not bringing my child into the world to this crap. After my father-in-law's prostate surgery, he spent about 45 minutes telling every person who walked by, "I feel a little woozy." He also kept asking if the doctor had already been in to see him. The answer was yes. I was delusional after a real long L&D trying to give birth to twins. Finally there was a shift change and I got a new anesthesiologist who basically told me I wasn't going to feel anything for a good 24 hours. I don't know what he gave me but he was right. Things turned emergency style and my husband got kicked out of the room, but my new best friend anesthesiologist held my hand while my babies were delivered. After that I tried to convince my husband to forego our previous naming plan and call our son the name of the anesthesiologist. My husband was like, "You're on drugs, we're not doing that," but I continued to call my son by that name for probably the first 18 hours of his life. I really hope that anesthesiologist remembers me as fondly as I remember him. I couldn't have done it without my husband, my children, and of course, the anesthesiologist. I straight up vomited on the anesthesiologist during the C-section for my first child, and he was incredibly nice about it, and said comforting calming things while holding my hand through the whole ordeal with vomit on his scrubs. That man was a son, and I hope he knows it. Not an anesthesiologist, but a patient. I was given fentanyl and versed for a colonoscopy. When I came to, I was devastated that a monkey was eating my cheese doodles. I was crying hysterically. They offered me juice, to which I cried and said, "I fricking love juice, except grapefruit. Frick grapefruit." Also, they had my boyfriend packing me up to go home, and I cried, "Am I being arrested?" That crap was the good crap. When my husband was in the recovery room coming out of anesthesia, he looked me in the eyes and very seriously said, "Drugs are a heck of a drug." I was trying not to laugh too hard but it was hilarious. I still quote that at him sometimes. Me coming to after getting wisdom teeth out. "So how long until the anesthetic kicks in?" "Oh, your surgery is already done." "Already? Man, that was fast. It's been 2 hours. Whoa, did I just time travel?" I said something similar, followed by standing up and saying something, "I want to thank all y'all for doing such an amazing job." I was gently sat back down and proceeded to take a power nap. Patient: when I was coming up from shoulder surgery on a pretty substantial dose of fentanyl, my wife told me that. I looked at the head nurse and said, "Your boobs are spectacular. I want to see them." I have no memory of it, but apparently the wife was mortified, and the nurse thought it was hysterical. She also said it wasn't particularly unusual to get comments of that sort. I guess they are spectacular then. When I was 9 and having jaw surgery, the surgeon was putting me under and said, "Say bye to your mommy," and apparently 9-year-old me thought that meant they were going to kill me. My mother says I gave her a look of absolute terror and then passed out. Thanks for the silver. I didn't die, so I consider it a net win. You poor thing. I had to go under for ear surgery once. I thought it'd be funny if I asked, "Does anyone need anything?" while I'm out right before I went under. I remember it kicking in way quicker than I thought it would, so I had to take my chance while I still had it. I yelled it but got a very confused look from everyone standing around me. Took a minute for me to realize I had accidentally yelled it while I was waking up from surgery. Oops. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.